And more, my brother, hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you, as we're going to be joined in a few minutes by Greg Waddell. He does such great work over at the Field of 68, Sleepers Media, and so much more. We're going to be chatting quite a bit of Big Ten with him. He's also feeling pretty bullish about BYU, so we're going to be diving in there. I've been of the proponent that the Big Ten is going to have a lot of parity, a lot of teams where you don't necessarily have that one tried and true team that I feel like is a top flight team. He is going to push back on that just a little bit with the team that he thinks is going to be able to go through the Big Ten, have themselves a really nice season, so we're going to be diving in there. Going to talk about a few teams that he is bullish and bearish on, including one team that might be a little bit of a surprise that he's bearish on as well. So we're going to have a nice chat there. Here in the first segment, I'm going to talk a little bit about the UNLV football situation. There's not a ton that I'm going to be diving in on just because this is a sports betting show. This is not one of those embrace debate short sort of shows or anything like that. And I don't think that many of you guys tuning into this podcast want to be hearing me go into that front, and we are going to stay away from that. But I do want to just reflect on it a little bit just because it is the day and age that we live in terms of college sports, where money is becoming a little bit more king in the, shall we say, just sphere in general, whether that's college football, college basketball, college baseball. You do go down the list. So I do feel like it warrants a little bit of lip service and just how to take a look at it from a gambling front. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letter CM, naming does not matter. Size per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. The other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And we did not get in any Twitter/X questions in terms of the college basketball side of things, so please do let me know what you want to hear on this podcast. We're down to 4 conference previews remaining, and well, I can't do this all in the next 4 days, or else we'll probably be pretty bored over the next few weeks. Plus, I do it based on guest availability. We're probably going to be getting those taken care of within the next, I would say, about 3 or so weeks. We've got the Big Ten, the Big 12, the Big East, and the SEC all left to do, but do want to talk about what has happened with UNLV, as you got a few opt-outs at the quarterback spot due to the fact that money is getting involved. And if you notice, I'm not necessarily the Mona Lisa Vito of college football handicapping. This is not a podcast where I'm going to be giving you too many college football picks. So Greg Waddell is coming on in segment number 2 over at Sleepers Media. They are doing a little bit more with college football, so I'm not going to sell you some bag of goods that I know like all about UNLV football or anything like that. But what I do know is that this is a messy situation, and I feel like this just fortifies my position even more of not being a futures player in college basketball and just taking it a little bit more game to game, because you just don't know what's going to happen in this landscape. Like, it's already a crapshoot in my opinion when it comes to taking a look at odds to be able to win the title and odds to be able to make the Final Four, because in college basketball, unlike any other sport, you can get darn near any matchup when it matters the most, and it is a one-and-done scenario, because every single team that I've ever watched in college basketball has flaws. Even that great Kentucky team when they had Anthony Davis, even that great Duke team that had Zion Williamson. Heck, they didn't even make it to the Final Four that season. Like, there is no one team that does not have some sort of a matchup that, you know what, it could trip them up a little bit, and that's a big reason why I do stay out of the futures market. So I apologize if some of you have been looking for some off-season futures. I just am not someone that really plays those, but hopefully you guys have been enjoying the guests that have been giving you some of the futures. So we do make up for it on that front, as I'm just a little bit more of a game-to-game guy myself, but I feel like the uncertainty just causes for this a little bit more, and it does cause you to perhaps be just trying to be able to take a look at the tenor of a just team in terms of a program in general as well, because a lot of what I've been hearing in terms of fallout of what has happened over at UNLV is that this probably would not happen in the SEC, and insert your power conference school here. I do not know if that is fact or not. Every single school is a little bit different, and I'm out here in lovely Las Vegas, and one thing that you can't be in lovely Las Vegas is cheap, and it sounds like UNLV and some of their boosters were trying to be, so that's not so terrific to say the least. But I mean, it does cause for a big giant world whirlwind, and I do think that this is just one other reason to be taking a look at things from game to game, because if you were, instead of UNLV football, looking at UNLV basketball, sure, maybe a place to bet on UNLV against insert your favorite Mountain West team, and then you find out about this news 24 to 48 hours in advance. You might need to hedge out of that. You might need to just take your loss and move on, something like that, but it's not like you'd be on the hook for a whole bunch. Meanwhile, if you're taking a look at some team to be able to win the title, you think that things are looking very good, and then all of a sudden you have something like this pop up. Well, you're up a creek without a rowing device. So I do think that this is just more reason to be taking a look at things a little bit more from a game-to-game perspective, because it is now what we deal with in college sports. Love it, hate it, feel indifferently. Like, I do think that players should be getting paid. I feel like the days that we had where guys were getting suspended over getting cream cheese and peanut butter with their bagel was a little bit extreme. And at the same time, I don't think I'm speaking out of term to say that we need a little bit more regulation here as well. So I'm between A and B, and that's the way that a lot of things are. Like, we notice it in terms of everything in life, like whether that be sports, whether that be your favorite restaurants, whether that be your favorite beer, whether that be politics, whether that be the way that you feel about family members. Typically, you'll hear one person be all in on A, you'll hear one person be all in on B. Typically, the answer is somewhere between A and B, and it's all about deciphering how much closer to A/B you should be, or if you should be just right at the 50-yard line. So hopefully that's your life lesson of the day right there. So just try to keep an even keel approach, but that's just a little bit of my thoughts on what happened with the UNLV situation. Wish I could give you a whole heck of a lot more, but it's something that is going to be very situational, and hopefully we don't see it in college basketball, but I'm prepared for it as well, and it's just part of the reason why I do take things one game and one day at a time in terms of my handicapping. And a man that does a great job taking a look at so many different things in college basketball, that'd be our good friend Greg Waddell, and he joins me next right here on Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it's always great to be joined by this man, as we've got Greg Waddell aboard. He does such great work over at Sleepers Media, Action Network, and so much more. Taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball. I know that he and Carter Elliott over at Sleepers Media, I know that our good friend Tristan Freeman has been doing some great work over there as well. They've been doing an amazing job getting you set for the upcoming college basketball season, and I know that they're looking at all things Big Ten. Their Big Ten sort of stadium tour that they did 2 years ago is still absolutely tremendous. We'll need to see if they're going to be getting up to the West Coast to try to view those new teams like Oregon, USC, what have you, but I know that Greg is tirelessly getting set for what is going to be an amazing season. You're able to follow him on Twitter /X at GWizzy, the number 12 all together. And it's nice to have a Greg Squared podcast today. Thank you.
Always good to be here, Greg. And yeah, we got to make a West Coast trip because apparently BYU, they're in high demand right now. We've done a lot of BYU offseason coverage, and we've sort of fallen in love with their fan base. So I think Carter and I are sitting on some plane tickets in our email inbox right now. We just need to figure out when the right time is to go see Yegor Demon in person, but we'll make it out west. I can promise you that, buddy.
I love to hear it. And you know what? Let's start right there. We will certainly talk some Big Ten, but we've got a lot of conference realignment. As we know, BYU, they were going through it last offseason. And just how do you take a look at a BYU program that they've got an offseason coaching change, but I actually do like the fact that they went to the professional ranks. They were able to maintain some of their top flight talent from a season ago. And it does feel like this team is going to present a little bit of a wrinkle in a Big 12 where you do have to, in my opinion, be a little bit different to be able to bust through. And I think that BYU, even though I don't know if they're going to be able to get there or not, they have the potential to perhaps be able to rack the apple cart a little bit with those top teams.
Yeah, I mean, I got a lot of Kentucky fans mad at me this summer because I think they upgraded the coaching spot. And I won't really hide from saying that. Now, you could say, looking back, framing it broadly across the country, I think this was one of the rare coaching carousel swaps where Arkansas and Kentucky and BYU all feel like they got a better coach. So maybe the only real loser here was Eric Musselman. But in general, like, I just think BYU, when Mark Pope left, there was a lot of conversation about, well, you know, he did as good of a job as anyone could have done getting talent to that facility. That's been proven false before Kevin Young even coaches a game. He right now has put together the most talented BYU team that has been there since I've been alive. And Cannon catching, stealing him away from Purdue at the very last minute, going across the ocean and beating Illinois for Yegor Demon. They're going to be loaded. Like, I really like this team. They're young, but I mean, you mix in a couple vets. Mawat Mag from Rutgers is a guy who's won a lot of games, does all the little things on the basketball court. And, oh, by the way, AJ DeBanza is playing high school right down the road and has visited a bunch of times already. If it comes down to who writes the biggest check, we know BYU's got the money for it. So, goodness, things have flipped. And I know Kentucky fans like their coach, but I don't think BYU fans are itching to get their old coach back right now either.
Yeah, and the entire landscape of the Big 12 is so interesting because for the longest of time, it was in the Big 12 just a case where you had no nights off. And now it does feel like it is a little bit more of a top-heavy conference, and that's not necessarily to say that the teams at the bottom are going to be awful, though. I do think that there's a clear downgrade from the likes of Colorado, Arizona State, those teams that are going to be coming in, as opposed to those top-flight teams in Kansas, in Baylor, Iowa State, Houston, those four teams. I think that you can make the case that at the very least, three of them should be in the top 10, if not all four of them are in the top 10, and to be able to crack that top four and that top five, in my opinion, you do need to be a little bit different, just because I do feel like it's a little bit of a new dawn and a new day in the Big 12 where it's all about trying to keep up with those Big Four.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely right? Kansas is never going anywhere. And I think great coaches are also never going anywhere. Kelvin Sampson has finished KenPom #1 3 years running right now. Scott Drew, honestly, I'm worried the narrative is going to flip on him. He's my favorite coach in the country. But if he goes one more year losing before a Sweet 16, I mean, there are going to be some fingers pointed his direction with how much talent this year's version has. But, I mean, you can't deny it. Kansas is always going to have money and talent and experience based on how Bill Self learned from last season. And I think between Kansas, Baylor, and Houston, you're absolutely on point that it's a top-heavy conference. And I think all these teams in the middle of the pack need to sort of figure out, what is our program's identity, not just what is our year-to-year identity. Like a couple of years ago, Jerome Tang built a team that was good enough to go toe-to-toe with the best in the Big 12, make a deep run in the NCAA tournament. And then last year it imploded. And this year we'll see. You're building around Doug McDaniel and Coleman Hawkins, and among other guys. Those guys are talented players. But it's just one of those things where I think on an annual basis, any other team could pop up. I love what TJ Otzelberger has done. I think he could be the next great coach that kind of hasn't hit the mainstream yet, although us diehards are well familiar with who Otzelberger is. But watch that man make one Final Four, and suddenly we're going to talk about him like he could have a Scott Drew-like trajectory. So, it'll be a gauntlet of a season. This is the best conference in college basketball to me, but back to BYU, I'm not sleeping on them whatsoever because I think their top-end talent matches up quite nicely with some of those teams we mentioned at the top.
And that home court advantage that BYU is going to have at Provo, the old Marriott Center, that is going to be tremendous for them as well. And those teams having to travel from the Central Time Zone to the Mountain Time Zone, that is going to be difficult as well. As Greg Waddell, who does such great work over at Sleepers Media, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And how about if we talk about a conference that I feel like you can almost argue that the Big Ten is looking a little bit more like the Big 12, saying the fact that I feel like the Big Ten just doesn't have that top 5 team coming into this year. You could perhaps make a little bit of a case for Purdue. Right now, they are my #1 team in the Big Ten, but I just look at this Big Ten right now, and I don't necessarily see that one team that I think is going to compete for the Final Four, but I also don't see that team that's going to just completely flame out, be like outside the top 150 in terms of KenPom or anything like that. I feel like there's just a lot of equals in this conference, and I'm not sure how you're taking a look at this upcoming season, Greg, but I don't know if a single team gets out of Big Ten play with fewer than like 4 or 5 losses in conference play.
Yeah, well, there's too many teams, first of all. Like, let's start there. Realignment is crazy, and it's fun in some ways. Like, I'm enjoying watching Michigan USC on the football field right now. That's great. But as far as basketball is concerned, there's 18 teams in this league. 3 of them won't even make the conference tournament this year. Like, I don't think anybody's happy with that. So we're going to kind of grind our way through it. I'm sure this won't be the last of realignment changes that are coming. This sport is under fire right now, but I think it has a very tangible impact on the league this year because you're right. The middle of this league is a mess. It's an enormous mess because I think you've got Indiana with clearly the best roster in this league, even if you have some Mike Woodson questions or some fit concerns. And then you've got Purdue, who has the best coach in this league and arguably the best point guard in the country. And then you've got Illinois, who has about 11 different question marks and a brand new coaching staff around Brad Underwood. But there's no denying the talent and there's no denying Brad Underwood's success in conference compared to other coaches in the last 6 years that he's been there. So outside of those three, I don't know where you go. I mean, I think you can make an argument that there are roughly 9 or 10 teams that could be deserving of being listed as the fourth best team in this league. I also think every single one of those teams could be mentioned as the 14th best team in this league. There's not much separating the Marylands from the Ohio States, from the Michigans, from the Michigan States, from the Iowas. It's just a jumbled mess. So I'm excited for it in some ways because I think you can't take a night off. And in a lot of ways, I think the teams with good coaches will be the ones that emerge a little bit separating from the pack over a 20-game sample size. But I actually would, if you don't mind, I would push back on you on there isn't any team in this conference that you think can separate a little bit and maybe finish with 4, 5 losses, whatever it is in the league. I think that team is Indiana, Greg. And I have talked myself into this, and I'm on an island on it compared to a lot of Big Ten people. But I think they have so much more talent than anybody else in this league. And if you go down and you list the best players, all conference teams, projections, they've got 4 of the roughly top 15 to 20 guys in this league, from Miles Rice to Mackenzie Mbako, who easily could have gone to the NBA draft last year, to Oumar Ballo, who has started 90 games on 30-win teams in his career. He's a walking double-double. And then Malik Renew, whose numbers were insane last year as part of a 2 big front court that, you know, people want to blame Indiana for having fit concerns. The reality was they just didn't have any good guards. I think that's changed this year. Miles Rice is a sensational player. Cannon Carlisle is a talent as well. If it doesn't work, Woodson's going to have a lot of fingers pointed at him, but I would make the case that it's really going to work.
And I think that this is a very good case of 2 things being true, because I do agree with you that if you look at raw talent and if you put just all the rosters on a piece of paper, you removed all the coaches and everything like that, I don't think that there is any denying that Indiana has the most sheer talent out there, but you were also bringing this up as well. And I think that this is this thing that I take a look at in terms of Big Ten. You were talking about the better coach teams are probably going to be the ones that separate themselves. And I do think that this year in the Big Ten, it is going to be coming down to a lot of scheduling spots. It's going to be coming down to home court advantage, what coaches can get the most out of their teams late. And that's the biggest hang up that I do have on Indiana, because I'm with you in terms of talent. I just feel like I need to see it to believe it for Mike Woodson. And I do believe that what you were saying a few minutes ago in terms of the better coach teams being able to rise up is going to very much hold true in the Big Ten.
So I think you're right about that. I don't love that I've taken on a position of a big Mike Woodson defender this offseason, but again, let me try and make the case. I think 2 years ago, we saw Mike Woodson with a relatively complete roster. Now, I'll be honest, I like this year's roster more, but 2 years ago, he had Trace Jackson Davis and Jalen Hood-Schifino. And by the end of the season, those two were arguably the best guard-big combo in the country. And around them, he had some clunky pieces. I mean, Race Thompson was not a great fit in the front court with TJD. You look back, I never loved Xavier Johnson. Miller Kopp was a vet, but he just wasn't that good. But that team succeeded, in my opinion. I mean, I think they finished a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament, won 1 game. Yes, you would have liked to see them go further, but let's not forget, they swept Purdue in the regular season that year. The Zach Edey, Matt Painter, #1 overall seed. I think that there are a lot of questions with Mike Woodson, but to me, the biggest ones have been the rosters he has built. It's not that the dude straight up can't coach. And to me, he fixed all of his roster issues this offseason, or maybe more accurately, Indiana boosters fixed all of those roster problems this offseason. But you really look at it, 2 of his biggest competitors in this league, coaching-wise, are Matt Painter and Tom Izzo. And I know Matt Painter just made a national championship game, but Matt Painter just lost a 5-star recruit because he wouldn't promise him a starting spot. Tom Izzo is still struggling to spend money and fill his roster with good players from the transfer portal. Mike Woodson's not having those issues. At a certain point, talent and money in this era is going to kind of supersede any questions on how you want to coach in game. And I think this year could be a statement year for the Hoosiers.
Yep, and I'm so glad that you bring that up as well, because you know as well as I do, I am from the great state of Wisconsin. That's my big hang up with Wisconsin as well, a team that I just feel like there have been so many missed opportunities the last few off seasons for them. I actually do like the fact that they bring in John Tone Jay. I felt like that was a good pickup for them in the transfer portal, but I feel like Wisconsin is just sort of stuck in yesteryear in terms of their program, and that's a team I feel like is getting passed right now in the Big Ten, and in a day and age where we were just talking about it, the margins are going to be very thin in the Big Ten. I just feel like this is going to be one of those teams that's going to be close but no cigar in so many of these games this year.
Yeah, it was hard for Wisconsin, right? Because I think there are some institutional limitations that I don't know who you even necessarily blame. But the reality is when AJ Storr became what he was by the end of the season, everybody knew he was going to leave Wisconsin, or at least he was going to field offers that any logical person would leave Wisconsin for, you know? I think Chucky Hepburn was the one that may actually hurt you more than AJ Storr, as crazy as that sounds, because to me, Chucky Hepburn's played, 3 years at Wisconsin, heading into his fourth year right now. He's not the greatest player in the world, but he's been, a really big part of some really good teams. And he's a guy that in theory, you would have loved to see have his senior day moment at the Kohl Center and, kind of have one more chance at taking that next step. And instead, it's like, okay, Louisville overpaid for him. All right, what do we do? Wisconsin's not the only team in the country, certainly not even the only team in the Big Ten that has these types of issues. We know Michigan has had problems at their university that other schools don't have to deal with. But I think that's kind of the defining thing for me right now as we enter this new era. When you look at the Big Ten as a whole, people wonder, why is this league not experiencing the success that we want in March? And there's multiple reasons for it. Some of it has been fluky play. Some of it has been, I think, kind of building through the post. And I don't know if that necessarily is the best formula, but the biggest thing to me by far has been that there's a lot of great programs that have made runs to Final Fours in the last 10 to 15 years that either have institutional problems right now or coaches who don't want to play the game in this era. And that's just not the case from the best schools in the Big East, the best schools in the ACC, the best programs in the SEC. It's a very Big Ten specific problem. And it's why I think the door is open for coaches like Mike Woodson and Brad Underwood, if they can just take care of their business every summer and keep reloading on an annual basis.
Absolutely. And I do feel like Wisconsin is one of those teams that is going to be dealing with this along with schools like Stanford. They deal with the institutional, just academic standards, because I can tell you right now, I went to high school out there in the great state of Wisconsin. I did not have the grades to get into UW-Madison. I instead went to UW-Oshkosh. So one of the greatest decisions of my life, but I did not have the grades to get in there. And there are a lot of students that do not have the grades to be able to get into that fine institution, which that can be a little bit of a limiter when it comes to basketball. It's Greg Waddell, who does such amazing work over at Sleepers Media, is joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Greg, I know that you brought up Indiana and BYU as a few teams that you feel bullish on. I want to ask you a little bit on the flip side. Is there a team or two that right now you're looking at it? It could be from any conference. It could be from a power conference. It could be a mid-major. Just go down the list. But is there a team or two that you're hearing a lot of hype from them in the national media and you think maybe it's a little bit misplaced and maybe you feel like that team is getting just a little bit too much hype and it's a little bit undeserved?
Oh boy, Greg, you're putting me on the hot seat, but I know to expect these type of questions when I come on this great program. I'll throw one out there that I'm already nervous to say. I got to speak from the heart whenever I talk to you, Greg. The one that comes up first in my mind is a team that is rated very highly for good reason. It's the UConn Huskies. I think they should be ranked high. I mean, this is the program that runs this sport. This is the best coach that I've seen since I've lived on this planet in 31 years watching college basketball. I would take Dan Hurley over anyone. I trust him more than anyone to get things figured out and to maximize his team. No matter what seed they are come the NCAA tournament, I don't want to see this team in my draw, ever. I don't want to be the team that has to knock off UConn. With that said, I have some pretty large roster questions on this version of UConn. And there was some behind-the-scenes footage that came out probably about a week ago now. I'm sure you saw some of this, Greg, but kind of an all-access Dan Hurley type sit-down interview. And you got some really rare practice footage that he was willing to share with people. And it was a great look at how maniacal he is and how it works, right? How much he demands of everyone he works with. But you also got a little bit of quick intel on the players that are struggling right now. And there's two spots I'm keeping my eye on. The biggest one is center. They have won 2 straight national championships because they've had Adama Sanogo and Donovan Clingan back-to-back. Terrace Reed is not that. Samson Johnson is not that. And I was shocked when Terrace Reed got the offer to UConn because he physically fits the profile of one of the best centers in the country. But he is just so slow to process plays within the game. And I don't know what it is. I don't think the man's a non-intelligent individual. It's just a really slow processing speed that I haven't seen from many bigs in my entire life of watching Michigan, let alone a program with the standards of UConn. And you kind of heard Dan Hurley say that. He brought up an example of, hey, we had a charity softball game and a ground ball was hit to Terrace and he just saw it way slower than you should. And he's struggling with that in practice right now. So I really think they're going to be underwhelmed by what they have at the front court spot. And then point guard, there's a couple guys that I think they're going to have chances with. Diarra, to me, is not a starting point guard on a Final Four caliber team. He's just not. He's a great glue guy. He's a great bench guard. To me, their best path forward would be for Ahmad Noel to kind of come in as a freshman and take over and be good enough to elevate that team forward. I think there is a very high chance of that happening, but until I see it with my own eyes, they're the team in the top 10 right now that just sort of feels like we've kind of jumped the gun on how good that roster really is.
We went all the way to talking about college basketball with fielding a ground ball in charity softball. That is about as deep as it gets right there. I absolutely love it, and that's what you can expect from Sleepers Media. That's what you can expect from the wonderful Greg Waddell. Greg, you're doing absolutely amazing work getting set for the upcoming college basketball season. I know that you've got hot takes, you've got winning bets, and you've got so much more. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, for all of that nonsense and more, you can follow us at Sleepers Media. We launched football previews and recaps this year. That's been the big thing. So a lot of applause goes to our friends from Heat Check. Riley Davis and Brian Ralph have been great to work with for that. Many other names I could name for you as well. But we've got that ongoing. Obviously, in the middle of the season there, basketball can't come soon enough. We'll have more previews and recaps of that. We're doing the Sleepers podcast 5 days a week. Follow us. Come subscribe to the channel. Hopefully, you'll see me back here on this very program with Greg Peterson soon.
Oh, there's no doubt about it. We will be getting Greg back on this fine podcast because, for one, he's got the best name out there. And for two, you get all the great insight that you just heard on this fine podcast. So big thanks to Greg for joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And if you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, whatever you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Janet_D1. Keep in mind, Lars CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast by that 5-star review. Have 4 conference previews remaining. Then we're going to be set for the upcoming college basketball season, less than 6 weeks away. So let me know what you want me to get you prepared for on this podcast for the upcoming season, as I'm with you guys every single day, all 366 days of the year, rain or shine, and I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.